All right, let's take a closer look at President Obama and his State of the Union address tonight. With us right now in the studio, Dan Gerstein. He's a political consultant and the president of Gotham Ghostwriters. For 10 years, he worked for Senator Joe Lieberman, helping run his 2004 presidential bid and also his 2006 Senate campaign. And in Washington, Rory Cooper, director of strategic communications at the Conservative Heritage Foundation. He's a former lead negotiator for the U.S.-China Strategic Economic Dialogue and a former senior policy advisor at the Energy Department. Gentlemen, great to have you here with Matt and myself. Dan, I want to kick it off with you. Two big issues that really are on President Obama's plate, I think, in most people's views, and that is dealing with the deficit, getting some hold on our federal government at this point and all the money we owe and just getting that under control, and then also creating jobs in this country. What can he effectively do at this point to really turn things around in your view?
Well, you just nailed it. That there's a central tension between those two goals. And
how do you do it?
Well, you got to differentiate between the short term and the long term, and that's something the president failed to do in his first 2 years in office. He was so busy dealing with the policy and the politics that he forgot to do what presidents have to do, which is persuade the country to come along with them. He didn't set a vision and present a strategy to deal with it.
He has to do more than persuade. He's got to actually set some strategy at this point. What strategy can he lay out that you think will be constructive in dealing with those two issues?
I think he's got to convince people he has a plan to get job creation going now, and then over the long term, create the growth that will be central to reducing the deficit. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of people don't really get, is that economic growth is probably the pivotal piece of this in reducing the deficit. We can cut spending, but we're never going to cut spending enough or raise taxes enough to deal with the deficit.
Rory, is there a central tension between those goals? Because we've had economists come on this show, Art Laffer, one of them, who have said if you do cut government spending as a percentage of GDP, you could see a pickup in the private sector hiring, which is what we really want to see, right?
Sure, that's right. You know, I agree with Dan. Over the last 2 years, President Obama has not led on this issue. He's allowed government to be at runaway spending, runaway control, runaway deficits, runaway debt, and now he's going to act like today like we're going on the right path. But that's not the fact. In fact, the government can't create jobs. The government has to get out of the way of blocking them. Right now, his energy policies are killing jobs. His healthcare policies are killing jobs. He can't keep going on trying to mask what he's doing as investments when, in fact, what he's doing is hurting the economy.
All right, Rory, that's fair, but I mean, he lays out some policy, but so do both the Republicans and the Democrats in terms of what they approve through Congress. I mean, what policies specifically do you think need to be laid out to deal with the deficit and to deal with job creation?
Well, you saw the Republicans today pass a resolution that would bring U.S. government spending back to '08 levels. That's a good start. And why don't we get the unspent stimulus funds that are still out there? Why don't we rein those back in? We have unobligated funds across the government that we can stop the checks from being cut today. Dan, why don't we start with the easy steps?
All right, so that's an easy step. But Dan, can we afford? Because there are folks that come on our program with Matt and myself who say we can't afford to do this, not quite yet in terms of the economy.
No, you can't. You can't depress demand at this really fragile state of the recovery.
Are we really that fragile?
Are we at that fragile state right now?
The IMF is upping estimates at this point for global growth.
The job creation that's going on right now is not even at the replacement level, as far as I understand it. And, you know, look at the forecast. We're still looking at 9% unemployment. There has to be a focus on bringing down unemployment, or there's going to be a political revolt in this country. And the danger for the Republicans, I got to take issue with what Rory was saying, this obsession with spending, there is not one poll that shows that people are more concerned about spending than jobs. And if all the Republicans do is talk about cutting spending, then they are going to make the same mistake President Obama did, which is to overreach and seem out of touch.
Wait, should the president be worried about what the polls say, or should he be worried about what's right for the country's economic future? I mean, it doesn't really matter, does it, if people are more concerned or less concerned about spending? If we build up a deficit that's so big that we can't, and our kids can't, and our grandkids can't afford to pay for it,
the problem is
we have a real problem.
You're conflating the long term with the short term. In the short term, the reason why the polls are important is the biggest challenge we face is a crisis in confidence. People don't believe our government and our business sector have what it takes to get us back on the road to long-term prosperity.
But they still shop like crazy over the holiday season.
But we're never going to consume our way out of this problem. We have a big jobs deficit in our middle class, good high-paying jobs that have disappeared are not coming back. We've got to come up with a long-term strategy and a short-term strategy, and that's what people are going to be listening to with President Obama tonight, is do they have confidence that he has a plan to get us out of this mess? And what he did before is not going to cut it, but the Republicans just talking about cutting spending, no one in America believes that that is a solution to our long-term job crisis.
Rory, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I would beg to differ with that. In fact, the only poll that matters is the one that happened in November when there was a huge tidal wave election because people were demanding that the economy get in shape, starting with the congressional checkbook. You know, we have to get spending in check so we can get the economy going.
Rory, there's no
and
evidence
that way the economy can create jobs.
That's no evidence what people were voting for. People were voting for that the government had the wrong priorities. They weren't focused on job creation, and that was a verdict on both
parties. The evidence is that the people that were elected are the people who ran on a platform of cutting spending, getting our fiscal order back in shape. Not unless, listen, tonight we're going to hear Jimmy Carter redux. We're going to act like the last 2 years didn't happen, when in fact all it is more investing in the same failed policies.
Clearly, the November vote showed you that people in America are concerned about out-of-control spending and deficits. I mean, that's what the Tea Party tidal wave was all about.
Conservative Republicans are.
What, though, you know, aside from the importance of that, what do you think the president needs to do in order to create jobs? I mean, to your point, what has to happen? Well, I mean, the dirty little secret is, and Rory will even probably agree with this, is there's very little that the federal government can actually do right now. There are very few levers, fiscal levers, that we have at our disposal because of the dire fiscal situation we're in. I think, again, what he can do, though, is convince people that he has a long-term strategy for job creation and economic growth. That will help people feel better. But he's also got to do something, which he is doing, which is convince the business community, which you guys have been talking a lot about, that he's not anti-business. The appointments he's made, the change in his rhetoric, right, the change in his orientation so far are all very encouraging.
Rory, let me ask you, though, about discretionary spending. There's not a heck of a lot. I mean, there's so much mandatory spending by the government. That really eats up the bulk of the government's budget. I mean, where are we going to spend? How can we, I mean, excuse me, where are we going to cut specifically that'll be enough to really kind of make a difference? And are the Republicans, do they have enough political will to actually start making cuts?
I believe they do. In fact, we are going to have to tackle entitlement spending. That's the big, elephant in the room. And then we're going to actually have to tackle the fact that government has grown in doubling and tripling in size over the last 10 years. Listen, education spending, which the president's going to focus on tonight, has tripled in the last few years, and yet grades and scores keep going down. So we need to prioritize government on the issues where they can actually be effective and stop doing the things where they're failing.
Well, the dumbest thing we could do would be to cut education spending, because every economist will tell you that investment in human capital are key to our economic competitiveness long term.
But not if it doesn't yield any results.
Well, that's absolutely right.
His point, I mean, education spending has actually gone up like 140%, including inflation, since the late 70s, and we've seen no increase in scores. I mean, from 2009 to 2010, we saw the Department of Education budget balloon to $106 billion. I mean,
oh, you're talking to one of the biggest education reformers going. I absolutely agree. We can't put more money into a bad system. At the same time, President Obama is actually doing some good things. Arnie Duncan, I think, is his best cabinet secretary. He is a real reformer, and he's actually changing the orientation at the federal level and with rates to the top at the state level.
Dan, the real way to reform is to actually give kids the same choices that President Obama had, which is to actually have school choice. And instead, you were beholden to the unions, so we're investing all this money into a broken system when, in fact, you're starving inner-city kids from being able to actually get an education.
That's just not true. President Obama is one of the biggest supporters of charter schools in the country right now.
Gentlemen, there's a lot more we could say. We've unfortunately run out of time, but good discussion. Rory Cooper down there in D.C., Dan Gerstein in here in studio. Guys, thank you so much. We appreciate it.